Have you ever heard of a company that was once so powerful it actually made more money than Microsoft, but today it's just gone? Well, let me tell you, it's a wild story. To really get your head around this, you have to think about plumbing. Seriously, you never see it, you don't think about it, but if it suddenly stopped working, your whole house would grind to a halt. The modern world basically runs on a kind of digital plumbing, and for decades, one company owned pretty much all the pipes. And that company was called Computer Associates, or CA Technologies, as it was known later on. They built the invisible, supercritical software that powered everything from the biggest banks and governments to basically every Fortune 500 company you can think of. Okay, so let's get into it. How did this invisible empire even start? Well, it's a classic story. A really ambitious founder meets a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You see, back before the 70s, there wasn't really a software industry. IBM sold you a giant computer, and the software was just kind of thrown in. But then a huge government antitrust ruling forced them to sell the two separately. And just like that, poof, a massive market opened up for anyone who could make software that was better or faster than IBM's. And stepping right into that opportunity was this guy, Charles Wang. He was an immigrant, a brilliant mathematician, and get this, the son of a former Supreme Court justice. He saw the opening and went for it. He actually funded the early days of Computer Associates with his personal credit cards. I mean, talk about grit. That same all-in attitude would shape the entire company. And Wang didn't just build a company. No, he created this ruthless, incredibly effective strategy that would define CA for the next 30 years. So this is the core of it all, right here. Wang figured out that trying to develop brand new software was slow, it was expensive, and it was super risky. It was way more efficient to just buy your competitors, take their customers, and absorb them into your own massive sales machine. It's a simple idea, but absolutely brutal in practice. And you can just see how incredibly well that strategy worked. The growth was just explosive. In '87, they pulled off the biggest software deal in history to take out their main rival. And by 1989, get this, CA becomes the first software company ever to hit $1 billion in revenue. They even beat Microsoft to that milestone. Insane, right? But here's what it was like on the inside, from the people who lived it. After they bought a company, they would come in hard. Mass layoffs were just part of the process. The whole culture was high pressure, unforgiving. It was amazing for profits, but yeah, they built a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. And you know, that relentless pressure to grow, to hit those quarterly numbers no matter what, well, it eventually pushed the company from being just aggressive into being straight-up criminals. By the time the dot-com bubble hit in the late 90s, the deals were getting huge. I mean, we are not talking small-time acquisitions anymore. We're talking almost $2 billion for Legend, $3.5 billion for Platinum, and a jaw-dropping $4 billion for Sterling. The pressure to make that money back was just astronomical. So, what happens when your real sales numbers can't possibly match Wall Street's crazy expectations? Well, if you're CA, you just invent a new reality. They came up with a practice that would become totally infamous, the 35-day month. Okay, so check this out. This is how they pulled it off, and it was shockingly simple. Step 1, you realize you're not going to hit your numbers. Step 2, you just pretend the quarter isn't over yet and secretly keep the books open for a few more days or even weeks. Step 3, any deals you close in the new quarter, you just backdate the contracts to make it look like they happened in the old one. And finally, step 4, you go to the world and proudly announce you beat your targets. And the scale of this was just staggering. In just a couple of years, the company faked over $3.3 billion in revenue. That's billion with a B. Well, the scheme finally blew up, and when it did, the consequences were huge. The CEO who took over from Charles Wang, Sanjay Kumar, ended up pleading guilty to securities fraud and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. You know, a scandal like that, it's a fatal blow. The company tried to rebrand, to pivot, but it was never going to be the empire it once was. Its time as the top predator was officially over. And then, in 2018, the end finally came. The massive chip company Broadcom swooped in and bought CA Technologies for almost $19 billion. And that was it. The book was closed on 4 decades of being an independent giant. But here's the best part of the story, the most perfect, brutal irony. Just look at this. Broadcom used CA's own ruthless playbook against them. They bought the company, they laid off tons of people, and they focused on just squeezing cash out of the existing customers. It's incredible. The predator literally became the prey. And just like that, Computer Associates, this titan of the tech industry that everyone once feared, was just completely and totally erased. And if there was any doubt left, this right here is the final symbolic nail in the coffin. In 2024, their enormous 60-acre headquarters on Long Island, the physical heart of the whole operation, was torn down, just wiped right off the map. But wait, here's the final twist. The company might be gone, the buildings might be rubble, but its technology is still absolutely everywhere. Remember that digital plumbing we talked about at the beginning? Yeah, well, it's still there. Software that CA built decades ago, stuff like a product called CA Gen, is still buried deep inside the core systems of the world's biggest banks and government agencies, quietly processing trillions and trillions of dollars. It's like a ghost in the global financial machine. And that's what we're left with. The company is a ghost, its buildings are dust, but its code is everywhere, still doing its job silently in the background. It leaves us with this really fascinating question for our digital world. In tech, does the plumber ever truly disappear?